Really think what I didn't like, that people had the opportunity here to meet without being politically correct.
Why did they close it?
Because it's forbidden. Because it's dangerous. I am the speaker of the society and I am so dangerous.
Haverbeck believes that the current world recession makes now the time for a resurgence of Nazi ideas.
I would say national socialism is a better way than capitalism or communism. That is quite clear, that I would say. Because economy as it is now is deadly. It's really deadly to the earth and to the human beings. We see it now.
The subject of feminism and its relation to fascism is actually an extremely obscure topic. The general misconception is that fascism is inherently anti-feminist. However, nothing could be further from the truth. Contrary to popular opinion, many early suffragettes that pushed feminist reforms were, as a matter of fact, heavily involved in historical fascism. Italian fascism, British fascism, and yes, even German National Socialism all had strong feminist factions. Many major reforms were, strictly speaking, conducted by these respective movements. Unfortunately, on the other hand, a lot of people think that this was never the case. In fact, many have a warped view of fascism and National Socialism when it comes to women, or even feminism. A great number of regular people, including to some extent modern fascists and National Socialists, think contrary to this from a position of ignorance and contempt. Yet, these respective ideologies were not anti-feminist by nature. Instead, they implicitly are pleading for a return to tradition, which is something these movements actually rejected. Though not completely related, I will actually be covering in a different video the subject of futurism, on how these were modernist movements, aka futuristic, to varying degrees, that broadly had overlap with the progressive movement in the case of National Socialism. This ranged from allowing women into the workforce, to supporting mothers, and yes, even voting on specific issues within women leagues to governmental organizations. The evidence shows that the early Italian feminists were, for the most part, foreigners to fascism. Many of the feminists were those who participated in the activities of the squadristia, i.e. revolutionary shock troops. Some fascists, like the young heroine squadrista Donate, joined the Italian Fasces of Combat, groups that were characterized by their violent clashes against communist militiamen. She joined the fascists in 1921 for civil voluntary service and created the propaganda for fascist candidates. She was frequently attacked by anti-fascist groups. Many fascists said that she had a baptism by fire for fearlessness and standing between the whistle of bullets shot at her. Donati, with a paramilitary group of Squadrismo, many from central Italy, succeeded in occupying the city of Rome during a mass Italian general strike of anti-fascists. She took part in the rescue operation, and Donati was one of the only women to take part in the fascist march on Rome. In 1923, she applied to join the paramilitary Blackshirts Volontaire Militia for National Security, formed in that year on March 4th. Mussolini said this about her, quote, "I have known of her fame for a long time, and I know that she is a fierce Italian and an indomitable fascist." Ending quote. In 1924, her health deteriorated. She died of tuberculosis on November 3rd in Mentelinka at the age of 24 years, and was proclaimed a martyr by the Fascist Party. Donati's body was exhumed on March 23, 1933, and reburied at the Chapel of Heroes at the Verona Cemetery in Rome. She was made into an icon of the youth, and in 1926 a health clinic in Mentelinka was dedicated to her. On October 17, 1937, a bronze statue of Donati was dedicated to her. Unfortunately, the statue was removed by the partisans in 1944. In 1922, the International Feminist Congress in Rome was held. Mussolini himself actually attended with the sponsorship of the PNF. Mussolini even gave a speech favorable to the political participation of women. Mussolini in 1923 delivered a speech in Padova at the first Women's Fascista Congress on the 2nd of June. Mussolini said this in a speech titled, "In times past, as in times present, women had always a predominant influence in shaping the destinies of humanity." Beginning quote. Fascisti did not belong to the multitude of flops and skeptics who mean to belittle the social and political importance of women. What does the vote matter? You will have it. But even when women do not vote and did not wish to vote in time past as in time present, women had always a predominant influence in shaping the destinies of humanity. Thus, the women of Fascismo, who bravely wear the glorious black shirt and gather around our standards, are destined to write a splendid page of history to help with the self-sacrifice and deeds, Italian Fascismo. Ending quote. The women's-only groups with the women's leagues were formed by fascism. The first was created in Milan in 1919, and others quickly followed. The conversion of these feminists to fascism is one of the reasons why Italian historians have been reluctant to study this topic. Before fascism, the condition of women had not been a part of government policy. But in 1919, the first fascist manifesto, published in Il Popolo d'Italia, already promised the female vote, so feminists quickly channeled and joined the fascist forces. Once in power, fascism promptly fulfilled its promises of female emancipation. In 1925, granted voting rights to women. In December of the same year, fascism began the first reform of the feminine question with the creation of the National Motherhood and Childhood Work to support mothers and children, and in 1927, the campaign for increased birth rates. But the first serious effort to create mass women's organizations had to be postponed until the early 1930s.
5 minuti in un nido di bambini dove sono accolti i figli di madri operaie vi diranno meglio di ogni parola l'alto valore sociale e umano dell'azione che l'opera maternità ed infanzia svolge in ogni parte d'Italia.
Noi ricordatevi che la mutua, la previdenza, tutte queste cose sono partite tutte dall'Italia, prima della guerra. Tutti gli altri stati non avevano niente, noi avevamo già tutte queste assistenze. Le ragazze madri, che allora non era come adesso, se rimanevano incinta, venivano allontanate da casa. Allora noi le raccoglievamo e c'erano dei posti dove venivano ricoverate e venivano soccorse, però da ragazze italiane, perché anche le suore, siccome avevano sbagliato, invece di essere vicine, le trattavano male e gli dicevano le parolacce. Una ragazza può anche sbagliare.
One of these organizations that was promoted by the state was, funnily enough, the Association of Jewish Women of Italy. To achieve the desire of women to identify and serve the national community, the regime began a difficult balance in pursuit of modernization and emancipation. After 1925, feminists turned their efforts to social volunteering and cultural activism, giving rise to a new feminine subculture of national dimensions. This came to be defined as healthy feminism as opposed to vain feminism. The feminists were as a collective the most enthusiastic about fascism, since there were very few feminists who opposed it, mainly conservatives. These were the official groups that historiography has wanted to ignore in favor of vain feminism to present to the public the anti-fascist view, pushing the narrative that fascism was an anti-women ideology motivated by some vague appeal to traditionalism. Fascism gave life to a broad spectrum of maternalistic policy, criminalization of abortion, protection and guarantees for maternity, loans for married couples and newborns, career preferences for parents of large families, institutions of health and social assistance for the family and childhood. This fascist feminism is found at its peak as interpreted by Laura Cabarini Castarelli.
They were authentic for love of the homeland, a long humanitarianism, and a lively social sentiment to spingere him to sympathize with the fascist program of valorization of victory, of exaltation of the national war.
The perfect fascist woman was a hybrid, new and interesting. She served the needs of the family by being a mother, and at the same time took care of the interests of the fascist state by participating in society. This was the essence of Donna Fascista. However, fascist feminism, unlike liberal feminism, does not seek to distance women from the motherhood, or to make them compete with men by equating them in the exercise of male roles. Fascist feminism was not pro-abortion, neither an enemy of the family institution, and therefore cannot be described as liberating from the point of view of the liberal. Therefore, this fascist feminism does not come to fruition within the global feminist movement, as we know it today, both because of the defeat of fascism on the battlefield, and because the greater push of liberal feminism, which led together with the export of Marxist feminism to post-war gender feminism. Now, the maternalistic policy today is considered a disgrace for women. Fascism argues the contrary to this. Maternalism is venerated as a noble value. As for education of both men and women, it says this in Article 11 of S 57.7.1, men and women are admitted to the competitions of qualification exams, with the exception of the competitions of classes 4 and 5, limited to competitions for technical institution, 6 and 7, limited to the competitions of classical high school, and the scientific high school, referred to the attached table, which are reserved for men in competitions and qualifications, exams for master gardener, and teaching institutions which are reserved for women. As far as the educational reform went, this was actually extremely unprecedented in Italy. During this time too, great importance was attached to female sport, in particular through the creation of women's youth organizations parallel to those of men, as well as the establishment of the OMNI in 1925, a national welfare organization that set itself upon the goal of helping mothers and children in need. It helped especially single mothers, and the organization existed until 1975 and had been active for 50 years. In 1936, Ordina Valla became the first female Italian to win an Olympic gold medal at the Olympic Games in Berlin, making her a role model among Italian youth. Valla, often known by her nickname Little Wave, she won the 1936 Olympic Games 80 hurdles gold medal, having set a world record of 11.6 in her semifinal. In addition, many women joined the female auxiliary service during the war.
Io ho prestato servizio nelle ausiliarie a Novara. Ero crocerossina e facevo servizio presso l'ospedale militare, dove c'erano ricoverati i soldati che venivano dal fronte. Poi un'altra volta siamo andati, hanno fatto deragliare un treno sul Sesia, perciò c'erano lì tutti i feriti. Siamo andati lì per recuperarli e una nostra compagna, un'ausiliaria, ha avuto la medaglia d'oro perché ha visto una mamma per terra con la pancia, una donna incinta, e ha visto che arrivava un apparecchio americano, gli si è buttata sopra e quello lì si è abbassato e l'ha mitragliata. C'è la fotografia sul Corriere, la domenica del Corriere di quel periodo lì, prima pagina c'è la fotografia di questa ragazza che sta salvando col suo corpo questa donna.
Valentine D. Saint-Point, though not directly involved in fascism, did have connections with the Italian Futurist movement. By being into the artistic movements of Europe in 1912, she published a manifesto of futurist women. Her feminist ideology in the manifesto revolved around the emancipation of female eroticism by a synthesis of masculinity and femininity into a single being. Her writings caused a stir throughout Europe and were widely translated, placing women at the center of the debates of the futurist movement, eventually being the foundation of the idealization of women in fascism, Donna Fascista. Sir Oswald Mosley himself, the leader of the British Union of Fascists, was in fact a self-proclaimed feminist. Like Mussolini, he had a disdain for strict cultural conservatism. Mosley, like Mussolini in fact, was in many ways a progressive. Besides having many feminists inside his party, in his book, Fascism, 100 Questions Asked and Answered, Mosley says this, beginning quote, Question 31. Would women be eligible as representatives on all corporations? On any corporations? They will be eligible for all corporations representing their industry or profession. In addition, the great majority of women who are wives and mothers will for the first time be given effective representation by fascism. A special corporation will be created for them, which will have special standing in the state. The corporation will deal with outstanding women's questions, such as mother and child welfare. In addition, it will assist the government in such matters as food prices, housing, education, and other subjects in which the opinion of a practical housewife is often more than that of a socialist professor or spinster politician. Question 32. Will the position of women be in any way inferior under fascism? Certainly not. Fascism in Britain will maintain the British principle of honoring and elevating the position of women. We certainly combat the decadence of the present system, which treats the position of wife and mother as inferior. On the contrary, we consider this to be one of the greatest of human and racial functions to be honored and encouraged. But women will be free to pursue their own vacations. Fascism combats the false values of decadence not by force, but by persuasion and example. Ending quote. Like Italian fascism, British fascism gave women many modern reforms. As you can see, this is not a reactionary movement that was interested in making women below men. This is not a movement interested in reviving non-modern social conditions being imposed on society. Fascism has always been futuristic in this regard, in that it looks to the future. Besides Mosley, you also had Nora Elm on Fascism, Women, and Democracy in a 1935 essay in the Fascist Quarterly. Elm found Mosleyite fascism to be a modern and forward-thinking movement, to be a welcoming environment. 25% of the BUF membership were women. Women held positions of authority and leadership in the party, and a number of women, including Elm, were in 1936 put forward by the BUF as candidates for election. The drive and commitment of these members was not unappreciated, as Mosley observed in 1940, beginning quote, "My movement has been largely built up by the fanaticism of women. They hold ideas with tremendous passion." Ending quote. In Elm's published essay in the 1935 BUF Theoretical Journal, The Fascist Quarterly, Volume 1, Number 3, Elm demonstrates her own passion in her own words, presenting arguments for fascism not only as the true guarantor of liberty and women's interest, but also, intriguingly, as a natural continuation of the original suffragette movement, adding extremely parallel points of interest on feminism to Mussolini's fascism. I will not be reading the full essay, but I will still take a brief quotation from it.
In this conception of practical citizenship, the women's struggle resembles closely the new philosophy of fascism. Indeed, fascism is the logical, if much grander, conception of the momentous issues raised by the militant women of a generation ago. Nor do the points of resemblance end here. The women's movement, like the fascist movement, was conducted under strict discipline and cut across all party allegiance. Its supporters were drawn from every class and party. It appealed to women to forget self-interest, to relinquish petty personal advantages and the privilege of the sheltered few for the benefit of the many, and to stand together against the wrongs and injustices which were inherent in a system so disastrous to the well-being of the race. Like the fascist movement, too, it chose its leader, and once having chosen, gave to that leader absolute authority to direct its policy and destiny, displaying a loyalty and a devotion never surpassed in the history of this country. Moreover, like the fascist movement again, it faced the brutality of the streets, the jeers of its opponents, the misapprehensions of the well-disposed, and the rancor of the politicians. It endured the hatred of the existing government, and finally the loneliness of the prison cell and the horror of forcible feeding. Its speakers standing in the open spaces and at the street corners were denied the right of free speech. Its champions selling their literature spat upon and reviled. Its deputations were manhandled. Suffragettes became the sport of any rowdy who cared to take the law into his own hands. To make the analogy the more exact, no calumny was too vile and no slander too base to set about the moral character of its leaders or the aims and objects of the women who owed them allegiance.
Annie Brock Griggs, another important feminist and early member of the BUF, joined partly in response to her disappointment with establishment conservatism. She made herself a name because of her speeches, and in recognition of her talents was appointed to the BUF staff as Women's Propaganda Officer in 1935. Later, she was to be promoted to the Chief Women's Officer, national leader of the movement's women's division, and represented the views of female members in the women's page of party newspaper Action. In 1937, Annie Brock Griggs stood unsuccessfully as a BUF candidate for Limehouse, East London, and she was active in the peace campaign against entry into World War II, detained during the war under defense of Regulation 18B. When released, she joined Mosley's post-war union movement, but suffered from ill health. She died from cancer in the 1960s. She published a pamphlet in 1936 called Women and Fascism, 10 Points of Fascist Policy for Women. This was a statement on the BUF's official stance on women's issues, approved of by Mosley himself. The writings has a strong focus on welfare and social reform with the purpose of benefiting women. These benefits, briefly summed up, were 1. Women having representation in Parliament. 2. Legalistic equality for women. 3. Equal pay for equal work. 4. The right to work and vote. 5. Improvement of working conditions for women. 6. Removal of all sexual discrimination. 7. Support for health and maternal infant welfare. 8. Affordable housing for families. 9. Free nursery schooling and free higher education. 10. An affordable food supply for families. The women in the BUF also held positions in security and took part in self-defense courses. Female members of several organizations were trained in jiu-jitsu, as Fascist Weekly reported, quote, "No male member of the BUF is permitted to use force upon any women, and women Reds often form a highly noisy and razor-carrying section at fascist meetings. Thus, we counter women with women," ending quote. In the book Feminist Fascism, Women in Britain's Fascist Movement by Julie V., Julie talks about Mary Richardson, a suffragette best remembered for defacing Rockaby Venus during a Votes for Women protest in 1914. At her worst, she's remembered for committing a number of acts of arson, smashed windows at the Home Office, and a bombing of a railway station, all for women's suffrage. She became one of Mosley's black shirts in the 30s, as did her friend, the Hitler-inspired Mary Allen, who traveled Europe investigating the workings of fascist regimes. Mary Allen's enthusiasm was shared by Margaret Dawson, and the two soon established a professional and intimate relationship, living together in London between 1914 and 1920. Allen, with her lesbian partner Margaret, had overseen the creation of Britain's first division of female police officers. Before that, had been active members of Emmeline Pankhurst's Women's Social and Political Union. Allen said this about the BUF.
I was first attracted to the black shirts because I saw in them the courage, the action, the loyalty, the gift of service, the ability to serve which I had known in the suffragette movement.
Allen met a number of fascist leaders abroad, including Iona Duffy in Ireland and Mussolini in Italy. In 1934, she met with Hitler and discussed women's police with him. She was captivated by Hitler and expressed her admiration for him in public. Although her links to Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists were unofficial until 1939, she engaged in various militant activities, including the formation of the Women's Reserve in 1933, which was intended to serve the country in the event of subversive forces taking over. Once she had joined the BUF, she wrote numerous articles for its newspapers and openly declared herself to be a fascist. The historian Julie V. has argued in Feminist Fascism,
Allen was a prominent supporter of Mosley's British Union, a movement she claimed she had joined due to her sympathy for its anti-war policy.
A more obscure female figure of British fascism was Rotha Burley Lintern Orman. Lintern Orman was a veteran of the Women's Emergency Corps and the Scottish Women's Hospitals for Foreign Services from 1914 to 1918. In 1918, she was the head of the British Red Cross Motor School that trained drivers for the battlefield. After the war, she formed the group British Fascisti in 1923. In Britain, this was actually the first openly fascist organization, and it was led by a woman. In Feminist Fascism, Julie V. suggests that the British Fascisti was a feminist response to the Prime Rose League. Lintern Orman was essentially a Tory conservative by inclination, but was driven by a strong anti-communism and attached herself to fascism largely because of her admiration for Benito Mussolini, and what she saw as his action style based politics. Direct action. Though extremely misguided in the sense that she wasn't an actual ideological fascist, what made her stand out is that she was for feminism. Quoting the book Feminist Fascism, beginning quote, "Not only was Lintern Orman a single woman, but her preference for women in uniform and the paramilitary regimentation of the feminine provoked a pejorative description of her as a mannish woman." Ending quote. Her preference for women in uniform referred to masculine inclinations, lesbian eroticism, and a general fervor for patriotic conformity. Eventually, she would fade into obscurity as her movement fell apart. After, she became addicted to drugs and alcohol. Other problems, such as having a more conservative worldview, contributed to being sidelined by actual fascist organizations, like Mosley's BUF. Arguably the most obscure form of feminist movements evolved in Germany. Popular viewpoints, even among fellow National Socialists, is that feminism is incompatible, Jewish, or bad. Unfortunately for detractors who actually happen to hate women in that sphere of thought, National Socialism had strong women's support and even a feminist bloc in the party. In the presidential election of March 1932, 26.5% of German women voted for Hitler. In the 1931 September elections, 3 million women voted for Nazi candidates, almost half of the total of 6.5 million votes cast for the Nazi Party. Over 4 million women participated in the Frauenwerk, a governmental-sponsored women's activity organization. 5 million belonged to the women's division of the German Labor Front. The Nazis' purpose in encouraging such organizations was to mobilize women for all aspects of the Reich for rejuvenation of femininity. One of the most prominent of the Nazi feminists was a teacher and writer, Sophia Roth-Bronner. The ideas she based her feminism around, like fellow members of the NSDAP's feminist bloc, was the veneration of a semi-mythical Nordic golden age of sexual equality, and their belief that a true national community based upon harmony and class comradeship was seen as impossible if the state continued to discriminate against half of the German population on sexual grounds. Sophie never officially joined the NSDAP, although she had been a member of various other German Volkisch groups, including the National Socialist Freedom Movement. She was still a fanatical supporter of National Socialism, was very active within the Volkisch literary movements, and like so many German nationalists, she greeted the new Hitler government in 1933 with enthusiasm. When Hitler came to power, Sophie made a memorandum that was soon published as the lead article of a newly established National Socialist journal, The German Female Fighter, and later it was compiled with multiple similar articles of Nazi feminism in the 1933 book, German Women Address to Adolf Hitler. This publication did receive brief written acknowledgement from the Prussian Reich Kommissar, Hermann Göring. Eventually the book was banned by the government in 1937, but it did accomplish minor reforms. These slight reforms, of course, could be women's organizations, maternal support, affordable housing, and other various pro-family, pro-mother policies, quite similar to those of Italian fascism and the BUF. Quoting from the memorandum to give everyone a feel of what she thinks,
in all other areas of civic life, the necessity of bringing in the foremost influence of women applies just as much. This claim to a greater area of responsibility cannot be dismissed as feminism. The folk have an inalienable right to leadership by the best Germans of both sexes. The folk comprises the entirety of the people. If it is to prosper, it can therefore only be led through the whole of the people. The best men and the best women have to share in the leadership of the nation. Men and women must participate in every leadership office.
Sophie believed that gender equality was rooted in anti-Semitism and the Nordic idea of beauty. This Nordic idea was insisted to be a past for the Germanic peoples where women had full equality and opportunities to fully realize themselves. The Nazi feminists believed women were priestesses, leaders, and even warriors. They referred to the Edda, Icelandic sagas, Havara Saga, Gesta Danorum, and the writings of Tacitus as evidence of this Nordic concept of feminism. These Nazi feminists used National Socialist principles of Germanists representing the highest good. They argued that Germany must model itself after the Nordic era. This was the basis of Volkisch feminism, though most of her major ideas of total gender equality were never implemented by Hitler. Sophie was still loyal to National Socialism during World War II. After World War II, Sophie was still supportive of Hitler and National Socialism up to her death. Even more interesting is that National Socialists had a mural of various feminists such as Hedwig Hale, Augustus Schmidt, and Helene Lang with the caption, quote, "We respect all genuine achievements made in earlier times because they correspond to the spirit of National Socialism," ending quote. Emma Hadlick, another feminist, sparked a debate in 1926 with an article in the National Observer, the official NSDAP party newspaper. Hadlick attacked Elsbeth Zander, then head of the women's organization associated with the Nazi Party, and provoked a series of charges and countercharges published in the paper from January to April 1926. Many of the issues raised surfaced again in 1933 with the publication of a book of essays, German Women Address to Adolf Hitler. Even after the National Socialists' assumption of power, the Nazi feminists continued to express their views. They believed that women, while different from men, were fully capable and intelligent and could make important contributions to the German people in many ways other than motherhood. In a truly German society, they claimed women would work and fight alongside their men, everyone struggling together for the national community. Nazi feminists used anthropological theory and postulated matriarchy as the earliest form of social organization. But more significantly, they argued that in the ancient Germanic society, men and women had been equally important. The argument between Nazi feminists and their opponents centered around the historical nature of Germanic society rather than the desirable conditions for the future. All of these arguments by Nazi feminists conform to National Socialist principles, but at least one woman went beyond these limits and adopted lines of reasoning reminiscent of the radical modern liberal anti-gender feminism. Ingrid Reichenau's essay on Gifted Women, a longer version of which she sent to Hitler in 1932 of March, argued that women had to have access to influential positions not only for the good of the state, but also for their own personal fulfillment. She defended career women from charges of causing unemployment, preferring to remain single, and the absence of desire for children. She accused men of seeking only comforts in marriage and therefore avoiding strong, intelligent women. She insisted that talented women with careers would make better mothers and full-time mothers. She cited Maria Theresa with her 16 children and Clara Schumann with her 8 as examples of accomplished women and good mothers. Ingrid warned that unused talents often broke out in other directions, as in hysteria, neurosis, and domestic tyranny. Aside from these major ideological disputes itself, what is particularly interesting about this debate is the lack of doctrinal rigidity. Alfred Rosenberg noted that Hadlick's original article on Nazi feminism and Zandler's reply to it revealed the range of ideas held by these feminist Nazis, and suggested that it would be best to air these differences in public. Other writers pointed out that the conflict testified to the vitality of the National Socialist movement. At the end of the resulting debate in the National Observer, Rosenberg left the issue to the party leadership, suggesting that all differences of opinion ought to give way before the central struggle against capitalism, Marxism, and Jewry. Ingrid, in raising these issues again in 1933, opened her book with 2 quotations from Hitler, one calling on anyone who saw danger threatening to the people to work openly against evil, the other stating that he who loves Germany may criticize us. Rosenberg noted in the National Observer that his comments on Hadlick's article were not meant to imply that women were inferior to men, only that their physiques and biology differed. Even after he ended the debate in the pages of the newspaper, the Nazi feminists continued to attack him for his views. Ingrid even went as far to accuse him of being a Jew for his last name being Rosenberg. Eventually, this ended up resulting in many feminists involved in the National Socialist movement being censored by the German state. More information on the Nazi feminists can be found in the book Mobilizing Women for War by Leila J. Rupp. As shown in the book, and from what I've gathered, women occupied many positions in the Third Reich, with women's administrations, women's education, and academia as professors and scholars, in police and fire services and transportation and camps and offices and in auxiliary military roles, in medicine, nurses, medical doctors, and military administrators and politics, as well as aviation. A number of women were recipients of the Iron Cross Second Class, 2 of the Iron Cross First Class, 15 had received the Blood Order, and many got the Golden Party Badge. The German Luftwaffe even had one of the first women pilots.
In 1937, Hannah Reich becomes the first woman to cross the Alps from Salzburg in a glider. Germany has a new heroine. Hitler appoints her flight captain, the first woman in the world to hold the rank.
In 1944, at least 60 women began to do combat flights in order to free up the male pilots for active duty, and hundreds of women became gliding instructors. Hannah Reich was one of them. After being a test pilot with many honors, she would see combat in 1945 as the last flight in and out of Berlin. After the war, in her last interview, she said this:
And what have we now in Germany? A country of bankers and car makers. Even our great army has gone soft. Soldiers wear beards and question orders. I am not ashamed to say I believed in National Socialism. I still wear the Iron Cross with diamonds Hitler gave me. But today, in all of Germany, you can't find a single person who voted Adolf Hitler into power. Many Germans feel guilty about the war, but they don't explain the real guilt we share, that we lost.
Hello everyone, this is Censored Anon, and I just wanted to add in this small portion. Once Zoltanis was done writing the script, he found some more information related to this topic that he unfortunately was not able to add in at the time. So I've decided to add this small segment for him. But before I go any further, I recommend that those of you who have Telegram check out the channel Frauenwerk. They have lots of cool information dedicated to women in both fascism and National Socialism. Furthermore, Zolt even found stuff related to a woman named Eleanor Bauer. She was one of the key founders of the NSDAP, helping Hitler from ground zero. Bauer served as a nurse during World War I and then assisted the Freikorps Oberland troops during their battle against the Bavarian Soviet Republic in the Baltic Campaign in 1919. Bauer was arrested on the 11th of March 1920 for disturbing the peace following an anti-Semitic speech at a women's rally in Munich. Her subsequent acquittal made her a hero of the Nazi movement. During the beer hall push, she received injuries and she was the only woman to participate in the beer hall push. For that, she received the Blood Order, being one of only 16 German females to be awarded the party's highest decoration. She remained a close friend of Hitler and was a member of his inner circle. Heinrich Himmler even appointed her as welfare sister for the Waffen-SS, making her equivalent to an SS Oberfuhrer, aka a Waffen-SS general. In 1934, Bauer founded the National Socialist Order of Sisters, a nursing organization, and became its honorary chairwoman in 1937, eventually being rewarded the Golden Party badge. She was promoted under the Nazi regime as the ideal Nazi woman. Der Spiegel called her the nurse of the Nazi nation. Bauer received a number of medals, including the Silesian Eagle Order, the Silver Medal for Bravery, and the Balticum Cross. After the war, Bauer never renounced National Socialism and never lacked self-confidence, once stating, "There is only one Frederick the Great, there is only one Adolf Hitler, and there is only one Sister Pia."
Just from this brief overview of the historical examples of feminism and fascism to National Socialism, the entire narrative is actually shattered. These were not anti-women or reactionary movements. The reforms were quite modernist and in fact quite anti-conservative, therefore counter-enlightening by Joseph D. Mastrey's standards if he'd be alive nowadays. Going against the falsehood narratives that you can see being spouted by modern so-called fascists and National Socialists who fit the left-wing boogeyman caricature of the basement misogynist. These movements were always about all of society, even women. Fascist movements were about promoting an organic society. Organic societies are based around cooperation regardless of class or sex. These are societies that are forward-thinking for the benefit of the national community. Any position contrary to this is not fascist or National Socialist. It is the most warped version of reactionary politics. Fascists and National Socialists didn't have to force women into the home or sell them on an ideology that contradicted the cumulative actuality of the modern world. They realized at the moment women didn't have to work, the majority of the time they would become mothers, and mothers would return home gladly to full-time homemaking. Fascist feminism was positively reinforcing family roles, and given the precarious nature of homemaking as a profession, they planned ways for women to have representation and security in the corporatist structure. The result was a platform that united women of various political persuasions, ages, and classes under the fascist worldview. Regardless if fascist feminism was genuine or not is up for debate. It should be pointed out that many modern feminists, Antifa, and yes, even some fascists have noticed this pro-women sentiment in fascism. Mainstream academia has acknowledged the achievements of fascist feminism, but instead actively tries to cover it up, or they come up with mental gymnastics to justify the counter-narrative. You don't necessarily need to agree with everything that I explained here, but it's perfectly compatible with the fascist worldview. After all, a pro-women fascist movement goes counter to left-wing propaganda and properly harmonizes the entire nation.
Prego, finisca.
Io non voglio dire che ho ragione, io voglio dire che ho vissuto un certo periodo nel quale veramente c'era più ordine, anche se non c'era una libertà completa, però non esageriamo, perché per esempio i fuoriusciti che lasciavano in Italia le famiglie, queste famiglie ricevevano lo stipendio dal fascismo. C'è stato un periodo di tranquillità, eccetera. Poi c'è stato un periodo purtroppo della guerra. La guerra dichiarata da Mussolini, ma anche dal re.
Sì.
Quando c'è guerra, il popolo che deve difendere la patria, ci sono i militari e ci sono anche i privati. Noi che abbiamo che ci siamo iscritti, abbiamo partecipato alla Repubblica Sociale.
Sì.
Abbiamo partecipato perché l'8 settembre ci ha fatto capire che l'Italia era ridotta ai minimi termini, era ridotta veramente all'obbrobrio.
Sì.
E allora l'amor di patria ci ha fatto pensare che era meglio sacrificare il proprio tempo, la propria vita, le proprie capacità nel difendere la patria.
Ok, è chiarissimo.